After missing out on the 2022 Olympics, I made one of the riskiest but also best decisions of my life, which was to move from the back seat into the front seat and learn how to drive sleds.
8th World Cup start for Sarah Blizzard.
The Australian duo here kicking off our race.
And look at the momentum. 5th best speed. She's absolutely flying.
I do think those are tears of joy. I think they are celebrating their Olympic dream.
Alright, I'm jumping straight into it and picking up where we left off from the last video. So the last video, if you haven't seen it, was just all about my experience around the 2022 Olympic season and the Olympics and being selected as an alternate and how heartbreaking that was for me. But we're going straight into it because the next decision that I made was one of the best and riskiest and maybe stupidest. Like, I don't really know how to describe it, but I am so grateful that I did that because it got me to where I am today. Everything I have done in this journey has got me to where I am today, but that was it. This one we're going to title The Bet because basically I bet on myself and look at where we ended up. So I left off saying that I said yes to going to the driving camp in Lake Placid over in America. That camp, I feel like Lake Placid is a track, like if you don't have a lot of experience driving, it was my second track I've ever driven. I had barely any experience driving and I hadn't for years as well. So I think that track is a track that you're going to know very quickly if you want to drive sleds or not. You're going to know very quickly if you want to do bobsleigh or not, I think. Like, it's a pretty busy track. It can be a pretty brutal track, especially if you're learning. You can crash on a lot of corners there. It was full on, but I was shitting myself going into the first day. And I was so nervous. I felt sick. I was also still struggling with jet lag, with mentally struggling. And there was just so much going into it. But the second I got into the sled and went down my first run, everything just disappeared in my head. Like, all that was happening was the track right in front of me. And I got to the bottom of the run and I was like, yeah, this is what we're doing. I'm like almost getting emotional talking about it because it was such a big thing, like jumping into the front seat and taking that risk on myself, like, and betting on myself in that way. But like, it just paid off. I was like, again, there's so much emotion. And then as soon as I got in the sled, I was like, yep, here we go. So from there, basically I learned to drive and was like, all right, I want to drive next season. It was not as easy as that. And bobsleigh is never just as easy as wanting to do something. There's so much that goes behind it. So when you're a pilot in bobsleigh, especially from a small nation such as Australia, you have to organize everything yourself. And in my situation, you have to fund everything yourself as well. So this means booking season, booking training times, finding a coach, paying for all of that, paying for the ice time, finding more equipment, finding sleds, finding brakemen. I wanted to make this happen, but there was no brakeman around. I didn't really know how to approach it, and basically something led me talking to Bree about it, and we kind of decided that I would be her brakeman for parts of season, but I would also learn to drive sleds. Sleds being monobob. So I'd kind of split it up, and depending on the race we were doing or where we were, I would learn to drive, especially in the pre-season, and I would compete at World Juniors, but I would also compete on World Cup with her at the same time. So being a newer driver, I wasn't obviously eligible to compete at World Cup yet, and of course I wouldn't want to do that yet anyway. So to be fair, that was actually a pretty good deal. I learned a lot by doing it that way. The next challenge was having a monobob to drive in, because monobob was only introduced into the Olympics in Beijing in 2022. That was the first time it was involved in the Olympics, and there wasn't a lot of years before that where it was on World Cup. I think it was actually called a World Series at that point. So there were not a lot of monobobs around. So all the monobobs are also standardized. Everyone has the same sled. It's all from the same company. So there were not a lot of monobobs around. With 2-man, 4-man, you know, people are selling their old ones, buying new ones. There's always some kind of around that you can get, or they do have new ones that are always developing. So monobob was not like that. I looked at renting one. It was going to cost me basically the price of doing 2.5 seasons was the cost of buying a brand new sled. So I had a conversation with my dad about the money that was left from my grandpa. But basically, my grandpa was my biggest fan. He didn't want to know how fast we're going in bobsleighs, didn't want to know how fast I was driving on the road in Germany, but he was my biggest supporter during everything in athletics, in bobsleigh, and he passed away going into the Olympic season in 2022. And he obviously had so much faith in what I was going to do. And so he is the reason I'm able to do what I'm able to do today, and I'm very grateful and lucky to be in this situation. Not to say I haven't had to hustle and work bloody hard, because I have. We bought a monobob. I went overseas. My first ever run, I went from the lower down start in Winterberg in Germany. Crashed out at corner 9. Went again, crashed out at corner 9. The coach I had at the time was like, look, if you're in this position, do this. Obviously we want to fix the corner, but if you're crashing, if you feel like you're going to crash again, like just rip it off. Just get it off there. So the next one, I made it down. Oh man, I was so rough on myself, but basically like I was about to crash, I ripped it off and it just thumps back down onto its runners. I'm like, oh my God. And then we made it down. So the next day I showed up and I also then crashed from a lower down corner, and he just made a comment of like, man, you girls are tough, you just keep going. And I'm like, well, what else am I going to do? Like, I want to make this work. Why would I do anything less? So that was my first 2 days of sliding. I had 3 crashes out of 6 runs. It is also the week where I met my fiance for the first time. He's from the Czech Republic. It was his first ever season, first week of sliding, and he basically, there were so many new people I didn't really acknowledge or say hi to anyone, and I was like focusing on myself and what I was doing, but he obviously noticed me. And here we are today. I always joke about it. I'm like, what, you saw the crazy girl from Australia that kept crashing and you were like, that's the one I want. So yeah, anyway, from there we went up to Segura and it was going okay, but then the track started speeding up and everything was moving faster, and I just had issues out of one corner down the bottom of the track, and I had a few crashes, and I was like, yeah, I think we decided it was a bit of a mental block, let's take a rest, because the next track we were going to was Altenburg in Germany. And I was like, oh boy, that's going to be a shit. I know that obviously that track has a reputation. I've been in a few crashes there. A lot of people really struggle with it. But my coach was like, you can drive Segura. Your problem with the corner lower down isn't necessarily a problem with the driving, because everything up top is quite technical and fast. If you can cope with that, you can cope with Altenburg. We got this. We'll take it slow and you got it. So yeah, took it slow. We went from a junior start, then from a ladies start, and then from the top. And I ended up actually doing my first Europa Cup race as a driver in Altenburg, which is such a full circle moment, because that was my first race as a brakeman. And then since then it was actually my first World Cup as well, in both monobob and 2-man. So it is, it's a very full circle moment how all of that has like come together. But basically for the race, we actually didn't even put on race suits. We weren't necessarily approaching it like a race. It was basically like a training race, and I think that was one of the best things I could have done, because it taught me about the environment before adding in other factors such as, the race suit, such as like really hyping yourself up. Like, the second day I did go a little bit harder than the first, and I did actually come in the top 10, which I was super proud of. And honestly, like leaving the track after race day, I had a little bit of a happy cry, because I was just so proud of what I had done, that I thought that was going to be, it was a challenge in a good way. I absolutely loved every minute of it. I approached it so seriously and just respected the hell out of the track and got my first race done. So from there, had a bit of success in Eagles in monobob. The first race I was like 7th or 8th, and then the next day I was allowed to put on my race suit for the first time, and I placed in the top 6. So in bobsleigh, a wider podium is the top 6. You'll have the top 3 on the podium, but then there'll be another 3 people as well, so you get recognised for that. So that was my first wider podium. We know that we had 2 top 3 results that season on the Winterberg EC when I was a brakeman for Brie, and that was a lot of fun as well. But yeah, from then on, I started doing a bit more in the back as a brakeman. I kind of moved into that, but then I did do World Juniors. So I went back to the track that I crashed on a heap at the start of season. I spent some time over there at Christmas. It was going really well. And then I went there for World Juniors. After the first run, completely unexpected, I was sitting in second place. Don't know where the hell that came from. My push was actually quite good compared to the field. By the way, this was the under 26 category. So I was 26 at the time, but I was in the under 26 category. It was my first and last year of World Juniors, and I know that that's a very old junior age. But yeah, sitting in second after the first run, and I was just in complete shock because I genuinely don't know where that came from. After the second run, unfortunately, I had a shocker of a run, and I finished in 4th place. I was 4th behind 3 Germans. Now, Germans dominate this sport, and that was the moment where I was like, this is going to work. I completely screwed up that second run, but with the potential of the first run, we're going to get somewhere with this. So then from that season onwards, I basically built up over the years in terms of monobob grew from there. Two-man was a bit harder to get going because of finding brakemen and having consistent brakemen throughout it, so that took a little bit more time. Basically the next season I did monobob all throughout it, and then did a little bit of two-man. And then the following season I was on World Cup for the full season in monobob and two-man. We decided to do the full World Cup season so that when I went into Olympic season, I had experienced World Cup. We knew that like it was a step that I probably needed another year before doing, but I didn't want my first World Cup to be Olympic season. So it was hard because, you know, most of the time we weren't making the top 20. In bobsleigh, the top 20 get 2 runs, and if you don't make the top 20, you just have the 1 run. We weren't always coming last, but like we were out the back. So definitely my driving improved throughout the season, but it was basically just a season of showing up, getting it done, learning from the experience. And honestly, like making my World Cup debut in Altenburg in monobob and two-man was like, that was pretty awesome. I think that was a pretty awesome experience. And yeah, there was definitely some good performances in there. Like Winterberg has shown up as one of my best tracks. Very grateful for that now, obviously considering how it started. And then yeah, that season we decided not to do World Champs because it was over in America, and that cost a lot of money to go, and I didn't have that, and it had already been a long season. I was having Achilles problems. Maybe I can mention my injuries. So this was the World Cup season. So this is 2024 to 2025 season. I tore the aponeurosis tissue between the 2 calf muscles right around here. So that's the tissue that kind of hangs around like in between the gastroc and soleus. There's not a lot of blood flow going there. It's a very like crappy injury to rehab because it involves both muscles. So often if you injure your gastroc, you can do a lot of walking and slow and moving to slowly build up. But because it involved my soleus and my gastroc, I basically couldn't do a lot for a while, and I kind of just had to like build up to running at speed but not build up. Like I couldn't just do like tempo runs or some relaxed running to build up like you do. I just kind of had to go into like 5-meter excels, 10-meter excels. I just had to get into sprinting. So that was rough. That was like a 12-week before back to full capacity, but it took a little bit longer than that because it is an injury that you can very commonly redo quite easily. And there was a lot of times where I'd be pushing or running and I would feel it and I would just stop because it was, yeah, not a nice feeling. Now, halfway through that season, I also had an issue with my left Achilles. So I've had Achilles tendinopathy on and off for years. So in this situation, my Achilles started hurting. I'm like, weird that it's happened on season. Normally on season, I don't have the issue. So I started doing iso holds, I started doing all the things, and it was almost just getting worse. The more of a warm-up I did, the worse it got. Saw one of the physios on season, and basically, he's like, it's not the tendon, it's the tissue around the tendon. That's just a really crappy area, it doesn't like load. I'm like, oh, cool, well that's really hard because we're like fully in the race season. So my warm-up for race days completely was like stripped back. At the end, I was doing bike sprints to warm up to push a bobsled, which is crazy, but that's what we had to do. So That was also another decision as to why we're like, let's not do world champs. There's no point going out there trying to perform when I'm struggling with this, and then my calf just keeps flaring up as well. Going into last season, which was Olympic season, I'm gonna save for the next video because I want to talk about the whole Olympic season and qualifying all in one block. What I was gonna say is I did actually strain my calf on the other leg on at the end of the first week of preseason sliding. So I have all of my calf Achilles issues right now. Currently we are working so hard to like improve on all of them, and it's definitely showing that there are positive signs in the direction that it's moving. But yeah, the last few years, unfortunately, my push has not been there just simply because of all of these injuries. It makes it hard to train in the preseason. It kind of like halts improvement. It makes it hard to execute things technically. It just like, it impacts so much. And the last 2 seasons of bobsleigh especially have been, my push has been definitely nowhere near where I wanted it to be because of all of these things that just keep coming up. But I'm very proud of like working with my coach Eric, who does all of my physical training. We've worked very hard through all of that, and I think without him I wouldn't have actually been able to get to the start line. I wouldn't have been able to push. I would have had to sit in, and it would have been shocking. So yeah, unfortunately, like, you know, the driving's improving. The push has slowly improved for sure, like especially through other things like technique, but all of these injuries have just kind of made it very hard to improve on that. So right now, I'm hoping the next season is better. It's looking like it could be, but you never know. Anything can happen. That's kind of a summary of those years. Like I said, basically, we built up over those 4 years. I definitely went into Olympic season being the least experienced in the field that was trying to qualify for the games. Like, if every other development pilot that started after the Olympics had so many more runs than me because they did a full season that first year after in monobob and 2-man, or just, you know, it was definitely going into Olympic season. I was like, I'm the most inexperienced, but that is not going to make a difference. I'm still going to give it my everything. So yeah, finishing that 2024-2025 season, I was feeling good about everything. I knew that we were going to have to work so hard going into Olympic season. You know, give it my everything. I came over so much earlier, again, before Olympic season, just to give it absolutely every chance possible. And yeah, I mean, obviously, if you're watching this, you know that we probably got to the Olympics, and I fully, at that point, believed that I would be going to the Olympics. So yeah, that's kind of a summary of those 3 seasons following the Beijing Olympics. I, again, am so proud of how far I've come since those Olympics and everything I've done to make my dream come true, basically. And obviously, if you're watching this, you know that I probably did get to the Olympics in 2026. But during this time, like, everything that I was doing was so planned out to try and qualify for those games. And in the back of my head, I was like, we're going to these Olympics. I'm going to make sure it happens no matter what. But obviously, you know, all these injuries came up, and anything can happen in these situations, and everyone just steps it up coming into Olympic year. And yeah, you never know. You just have to be kind of prepared for everything and anything, which I found out last time. And that was something that I think helped me so much going into Olympic season, was all of that experience and just being prepared for as many situations as I could be prepared for, putting myself in the best position to do well, and also putting myself in a mental place that I was positive going into the season, and making sure I just took something from every opportunity, every situation, and just tried to approach it in a positive way so I wasn't going in with a negative mindset. Because I was like, if I'm going to be negative, of course it's going to be a negative outcome. If I'm positive, well, then we have a chance. So that was kind of how I finished that 2024-25 season, going into the 2025-26 season, which was Olympic season. So I'm going to leave that there, and the next video will be all about that qualifying season. I'll talk through each of the races and just some of the feelings and emotions that kind of came through all of that. Because, you know, of course it wasn't a straight line. It wasn't as easy as it probably looked on the outside, but we got there. So yeah, I'll finish that one off here, and I will see you guys in the next video.